best if you go next to Martina, and then I will have a few questions that I'd like to ask in the end. So, Martina, finally you're in. After
that you can hear me.
Panic. Don't worry, I had one too. I'm actually on my husband's computer because it didn't work on mine, and yes, so I was late and I'm panicking because I don't know how to navigate his machine. So Martina is the assistant professor of sociology in the Department of Psychology and Cognitive Science at the University of Trento. She has been a Fulbright research scholar at the Yale Sociological Department. She has also done a postdoc at Yale. She has lots of accolades. She is chair of the European Studies at Pittsburgh, or she was, Pittsburgh University. So she teaches classes in qualitative methods, user experience, ethnography, design, and social exclusion. So she's going to talk to us today about, I guess, the recently published book, which has a rather suggestive title. Yes, the book is there, of Soviet Senoritas. I am very, very intrigued, you know. I don't want to be rude, you know, I was thinking my first impression was mail order brides, but I might be mistaken, and a female perspective on migration. So please take it away.
Thank you. Thanks everybody, and sorry for being late, but as Nadja said, I had some technical issues. Yes, I will be speaking about my book. Again, it's here, beautiful pinkish cover. It's been recently published just a couple of, almost a year ago, actually. Before sharing my presentation, I wanted to really thank the organizers. It's such an honor to be here with you, and it's such thanks for organizing this in such difficult times. I imagine it has been really an organizational ordeal. One more thing to add up. Yes, I'm in Trento, but for those interested in seeing a little bit of what we do in Trento, have a look at the International Migration Lab. It's a bunch of us different researchers with interdisciplinary backgrounds that work on migration from a fairly unusual perspective. So we pay attention to sexuality, to intimacy, to friendship, to how people make their homes, to religious practice, to basically the free time of the migrants. Okay, so I'll share now the presentation. Will I share the presentation? Oh my God. Okay. Yep, here we go. Okay. Allegedly it works. You can believe it. So, as I said, I will be speaking basically about Soviet migration to Italy, post-Soviet migration to Italy. If some of you might know that Italy is fairly new to migration flows. Basically, until 1973, it was classified as an emigration country. So immigration basically started fairly slowly at the end of the 70s, early 80s. I arrived to Italy 25 years ago, and when I entered Italy, there were just 400,000 immigrants, speaking always about regular immigrants. Today, their share, it's about 10% of the overall population, meaning around 6 million people. The recent and the very recent crisis did slow down the inflow, but it never actually stopped. So my interest in immigration lies in a very particular flow that comes from the former USSR. The history of this flow is extremely recent, and I ought to say that when I started my research, I did it with pioneers. Pioneers, in my definition, and not only mine, are basically the ones who technically pioneered migration. So people who came to a new place without having any previous networks or relationships in the area they migrate to. I'm speaking about women who started entering Italy at the turn of the millennium, oftentimes first going to Naples and then slowly making their way up, going northwards in a search for better job opportunities. Italy, like any other country, is a country where migration happens in flows, in waves, and also Italy is having its own ones. In Italy, the early comers were the Northern Africans, so Morocco, that is today the biggest community in Italy, and it has around 500,000 people. It was followed in historical terms by former Yugoslavs, by Albanians, which is the second biggest community in Italy nowadays, and then followed by Chinese that counts around 300,000 people today. Romanian citizens are also very big in terms of share. And then the former Soviet ones, which I will be speaking about more in
apologies,
detail.
Martina.
Yes.
We can't actually see your slides. What we see is just sort of your desktops. So you haven't started sharing the slides.
Oh. Okay. Okay, sorry. Let me.
So you're sharing the Finder.
Is it now okay?
Yes.
Okay. Excuse me.
No problem. So maybe you want to backtrack, kind of go back.
Well, I would just like to resume that.
Oh yeah. Okay. So yes.
Just basically where my interest in former Soviet migration lies.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you. Sorry for the interruption.
No. More specifically, the women I will be speaking about are coming from very specific areas of the former Soviet Union. The bigger dots signify more women came from these areas that are called in Ukraine oblasts. So it's like provinces, basically, regions. Whereas the smaller ones signify smaller numbers of women that then were part of the research I will be speaking about very shortly. The interesting thing about this map is that the women, the places the women come from are very scattered across the former USSR. By training, I'm an ethnographer, but still, I think that numbers will help us out to understand how big this phenomenon is. So here I present you a chart where we see non-EU foreigners and post-Soviet foreigners starting from 1992 till basically 2017. What you see is that there is a huge spike and the number of post-Soviet foreigners really starts growing slightly after the turn of the millennium. Some of you might know that Italy is also the country of amnesties, so there were a lot of amnesties in Italy. I will not talk profusely about them. But I will just mention that in the last amnesty, which actually happened this summer, it was originally meant for agricultural workers. The data have just been released, and they actually show that it has been used mostly by domestic workers, so women in Eastern Europe, where women and Eastern European women were prominent. So out of the 200,000 applications, 85 has been filed by domestic and care workers. Ukraine is the first nationality with a 10% share overall, followed by Georgia with little less than 10%. This flow, it's also, if we break it down into post-Soviet nationalities, we see that there is Ukraine, who basically reached almost 1/4 of presences in Italy, and followed by Moldova, then Russia, and other post-Soviet nationalities. The interesting thing about this flow is that it is a truly female one. It is very, very special in how the flow is basically was created. Happened at the beginning, but it also maintained this characteristic basically over this lengthy period of time. So the dotted line below tells us that if we take all regular foreigners in Italy, roughly speaking, over the past almost 30 years, the gender ratio was fairly well distributed. It's slighted. Let's say that we can say that it's around 50-50 in terms of gender ratio. Whereas for the post-Soviet nationals, that flow was born as a female-oriented one, meaning that out of 10 post-Soviet nationals, roughly 8 would be women and 3 would be men. And this thing remained stable over the years. So basically, I'm speaking about women who come from these 3 countries who migrate to Italy. They are mostly middle-aged. They have a past as a middle-class, college-educated professionals. Most of them are mothers or even grandmothers. The large majority is divorced, either de facto or de jure. And in Italy, they become care workers, or sidelki, like they like to call themselves, or rab, which basically means slave. Lavakuli is another derogatory term that they used during my research, which basically translates into ass washers. Badanti, it's the Italian name that describes them. They cater Italian families, often either middle class or even working class families, that for a work that it's a 24/7. How did the research start? Before getting into the detail of what I discovered. So basically, it started at the turn of the millennium, but explicitly starting as a research project since 2003. Basically, the research started when I noticed 2 women speaking Russian in the city where I was living at the time, and that later on became the area where I conducted my research. So I basically just stopped them, said hi in Russian, and I didn't know what to expect from them. I was just puzzled to hear that language around the area where I was living. And at that point, I did not imagine I would be doing research on them. Then my life changed a little bit. I decided to go for a PhD, and I decided I would actually be very interested in studying the women that I noticed their numbers were growing in the area where I conducted the research. So in a way, the access to the field was made possible because I already knew some of them, but I was also a migrant myself. I could speak a language that we could use for our exchange. I was a foreigner, as I said, but I was, in their minds, I was a successful foreigner because I was working as a clerk in an office. And I was in my early stay in Italy, I was a care worker myself, so I kind of knew what their job was about. Plus, I was writing a book, and the fact that I would tell their story was something that they really liked. I wouldn't encounter them either on the streets or in the parks or at Caritas, where they at the beginning would go and ask for some support. So our interactions mainly took place at the beginning in open spaces. Clearly, this created a lot of difficulties, because one thing is when you interact with one person or with 3 people in a park, but when numbers start to grow, this can it requires basically to manage difficulties in the field. Plus, being care workers, they had a very tight schedule. In all of that, I like to believe that trust was really important, and I believe that in my case, the centrality of trust was given by the fact that I had similar experiences, plus I was Eastern European like themselves. Fieldwork meant a lot of things for me. Oftentimes, they were also nice, and I had a nice time with them. But basically, over a period of time that now reached almost 2 decades, I spent a lot of time with them trying to understand how they made sense of their migration experience. And we'll see that now. So first of all, I kind of observed what did it meant for them to become a care worker. They were clearly expected to cook, clean, wash, and take care of the elderly people they assisted. But because they were the latest immigrants in the area, they ended up doing the jobs that other immigrant groups managed to avoid, which basically meant that they were paid less, oftentimes worked for elderlies that were in a severe health condition. Plus, oftentimes nobody would tell them what to do, and even if they were told what to do, their language knowledge was so poor, so that oftentimes they would say sì, bene, but in fact they were not able to understand what families expected for them. And that is true from a linguistic point of view, but also from a cultural point of view. And you see here the example of either cooking or cleaning, where basically you have to imagine those women, for instance, coming from a cultural milieu where they eat pierogi and where they eat borscht, and then getting to a place where elderly people assume they will eat pasta or spätzle or other things that are typical for the area. Yes. So becoming a care worker was much more difficult than what they have actually expected. And here I see some resonance with what Elli told you before with regards to how difficult Finnish language is for migrants. I have observed the same difficulty also for the ladies that I observed. Managing to become a care worker also meant that they had to learn quickly to take care, often within hours or days of their arrival, of an old, often ill, smelly, and ugly body. Many of them experienced high levels of emotional stress while quickly learning to hide their feelings of disgust. And here I cite a piece of Soviet Signoras. When I met Janina, who had arrived only a few days before, she was still reeling from the impression of the first time she had disrobed and washed her mama. They would call their elderlies mama or papa. And Janina says, her skin seems to fall from her. Her nails are yellow and hard. She has no hair on pointing to her genitalia. I did not know hair falls out even there. And then all of her body is stinky of all the things. I have been trying to wash her smell away for days. Yuck. She quickly added that when she had first been at the bathroom on her knees washing her mama in the old rusty bathtub in her flat, she had thought it would have been better to die than to live as a lavakuli. Although such a statement could easily appear as an exaggeration, the immediate identification shown in the other women's faces when she was telling that story persuaded me that the shocking character of her experience was widespread. So for the women, I basically did my research with, and I continue observing. Migration scatters from necessity. They perceive and describe themselves as savior of their families, as martyrs in the welfare of their family members. At the same time, migration is still a traumatic event in which they describe themselves as middle-class, respectable women, while in Italy their only job is to wash old asses. And yet, migration is still seen as a way to escape from a hopeless situation, oftentimes economic, to help their dear ones, but also to gain spaces of autonomy and consumption for themselves. A woman, they say, should be able to take care of herself. She should be beautiful, even when going out to throw the garbage. So migration, in a way, becomes a slow and ambiguous way to manage a new social self. So basically what I observed during my research is how they remade their selves into new people, basically. As I said, migration required a lot of sacrifices for these women. Most of them experienced long spans of irregularity. Most of them experienced the loss of a social status. So, for example, a lot of them who describe themselves as having had a professional career back in their country, basically said that with migration they lost it. Plus, there's the fact that they are away from their kids and they need to start. They started a new life in a new environment that they often perceive as hostile. Above all, they're also doing a socially despised work, and in Italy, they learned about heavy stereotypes that basically describe Eastern European Slavic women as women of loose morals and stealers of husbands. Okay, sorry. Why is it blocked? What? Sorry, it's. I don't know why is it blocked. Okay. Okay. Basically, during my research, I discovered that because of all that I have said in the previous slide, they had to dedicate a lot of time to create a positive image of the self, to include the social stigma that accompanied them, and to basically establish the conditions for recognition and social respect. Before stepping into the core discussion, maybe it's useful to sketch what decency means for the women I discuss here. So when they entered the migration mill, women held a very slim personal opinion driven by direct experience of what a decent woman is should have, or should behave. In broad terms, for them, decency is a standard made of family, work, consumption, religion, related selections. In the newly met environment, the idea of decency builds upon some starting blocks already experienced in the home country. So decency is often born in what Olga, for example, calls normal when describing what her life was before emigrating. She was working, she was a manager at a brewery. She had 80 people under her, and she was used to organize work. She has 2 kids, one at the university and a daughter who had 2 grandkids already graduated. And she says, I raised also my sister's kids, and now I work in a family. They are a good family. She works here in Italy, but I have no dignity because I feel this pain in my heart, and nobody thinks that I'm sad because even if my kids are grown up, I miss them a lot and I worry about them. And also this family does not understand that for me it's difficult. Yes, I know that I come here for the money, but they do not remember that I'm not their slave that cleans the house. I know that I must work well and I do my best, but I was also a director in Ukraine. So becoming a decent woman entails a specific idea of family. A family bears a twofold dimension. On the one side, it's important to be able to perform as a decent mother who cares for her children, and on the other, it's important to have a man that cares for you. So decency means being also cared for. To reach decency, one must have a respected work. So it's better to exit care work in order to become maybe a worker and to have specific working hours. So work within an organization is seen as decent rather than working within a private environment like houses can be. Access to consumption is very important because in this way you can show that you are a successful migrant. Moral behavior, it's important because it means in order to achieve it, it does not mean, for example, that you cannot have relationships in Italy, but they should be morally adequate. So settling in a new environment meant to restore a new decency, to regain a social recognition that has been lost as a result of migration. So in my research, I kind of tried to explore the various ways that those women used to gain recognition in this new social environment. And I tried to see how immigration changed them, both as women and as a group, as a migrant group. Here, I will mention just 2 examples. If anybody is interested to read more about it, you can have a look at my book. I will mention 2 examples of change. One is the consumer behavior, and the other is intimacy. So first of all, the arrival is clearly a phase of struggle. Most of the women I dealt with enter as tourists, then they overstay their visas and basically become irregular migrants. That means that they are trapped in Italy for all the period that it's required to gain their amnesty. When they got to the area where I did my research, they did not know anybody. I, for example, remember a woman who was exiting the train station and she was chanting a song in Russian because she hoped that in this way she would gain the attention of somebody because in order to be helped afterwards. In the upper right corner, you see these white minivans that that connected the areas of origins with the areas of reception. They would usually drive back and forth goods, people, and money on Thursdays and depart from the area where I did my research on Sunday morning, but not. So the first steps women kind of participated in the new environment were through consumption. Now, clearly, this might sound maybe a little bit naive to you, but if you're a care worker, aside from caring for the elderly, you also need to go grocery shopping. You need to go to have some contact with the locals. For them who were without money and had no possibility to actively participate in consumption, it was all about virtual participation. So consumption for them was something for the future. Psychologically, they felt deeply embedded in the world of consumption, from which at the same time they were financially excluded. So they knew all, they knew how much a computer costed. They knew, for example, breast implants. They knew how much breast implants costed, so on and so forth, which was kind of funny as a notion for me. At a certain point, however, women realized that they could start spending some money for themselves and kind of manage their incomes. So sending something back home, but also being part of this new consumption environment. So shopping started to be seen and started to be performed as a group activity. The first area where they performed shopping was in a safe environment, which was they basically created from scratch a parking lot. In this parking lot, we would go on Sunday mornings, and there the white vans that I mentioned to you before would basically take out the goods and sell them to the women that were coming there. This was also very important because it was the first venue where women would kind of dress up to go and meet their friends over there. So it was these were also the first attempts of them being a woman again. On Sundays we would meet there. We would buy beer and pumpkin seeds. We would chat about jobs. We would create basically friendships and start establishing networks. In this area, seeing and be seen while doing a very important core, which is sending money back home, was very, very important. In a way, they were performing here the duty towards there, to say it, probably how Waldinger would agree. Over the years, this informal market evolved. So if at the beginning of my research, it looked like I am showing it in this photograph to you, over the years, we had, tables with cheese, we had kefir, we had kielbasa, and we kind of started spending a lot of time, most of our Sundays over there. That also meant that over time, I noticed that some women decided how to behave with the money that they were basically earning. So there were women who avoided spending money and kind of preferred to stay put within their ethnic ties, while others started to experiment other forms of consumption. This process slowly built distance among these first two groups that became more and more separated along consumption lines. Consequently, the contacts between the two groups rarified more and more, and reaching the point of observing two completely distinctive groups. I believe I was in my second or third year of observation, and I clearly started observing these two distinctive groups. So one that basically went around shopping, and the other that basically did not. Exploring consumption also meant for them mingling with the locals in the Thursday open air market. Here are photos of some Thursdays that we spent in the market. We would cruise among the stalls. We also had, by then, they also had the possibility to interact with other immigrants who are often the sellers at these stalls. So I'm referring to Northern African men, to Chinese men, and more recently also to South Asian men. After this crusading on the market, we would buy some pizza, sit on the benches, which was the first type of very luxurious food. Luxurious because it was purchased, and luxurious because it was not cooked, and luxurious because it was really Italian, and it was eaten in a non-segregated area like the parking lot was. From then on, the group moved towards shopping among locals at different venues. Clearly, the first venues were the ones where basically working class people would purchase. So a lot of Chinese shops, Lidl, and similar venues. So this is to say that along the years I have observed how consumption acted as a differentiation mechanism along within the group, the early group of women that I started observing. The same thing in a way worked out also when it gets to sexuality, eroticism, and intimacy in immigration. One might wonder, why should sexuality matter in migration? Most of the research on migration is dedicated onto where the migrants work, what do they do, which is fine. But I was kind of interested to see what happens also when migrants do not work. And actually, while I was observing the women in their consumption behavior, I noticed that that because of their need to restore decency, their need to become kind of appreciated individuals again, they're kind of played out this intimacy, or as I call it, a hyper-femininity card, through which they basically performed a hypersexualized womanhood, for which they have seen there and interpreted there was a market for. That is to say that if you remember at the beginning in the early slides, I told you that the women that I have observed were mothers and grandmothers. Now, when we say mothers and grandmothers in Italy, we kind of see, okay, a mother is in her late 30s, early 40s, a grandmother is in her late 60s, probably 70s. With this, in anographical terms for former Soviet women, this is not the exact age, because most of the women who were young mothers and come from the former USSR, as I have observed, were in their late 20s, early 30s. By the time they are 40, they perceive themselves as babushkas, like they were explaining me. So for them, when they migrated, they thought that they were lost women. They could not have the possibility of a new intimacy, of a new love, of a new emotional life. But then they come to Italy, and then they discover that 40 years in post-Soviet terms, it's not the same thing as 40 years in Italian terms. That is to say that if you are 40, you can still claim some emotional life. You can still be looked at. You can still be courted. And this is something they experienced in Italy. It's basically, they have seen people, especially males, were looking at them with erotic desire. They were very clearly happy because of that, and because they understood that this could possibly be a way to claim the decency that they have lost through migration. So basically, I observed that women through migration and through slowly entering this new social environment, they kind of observed that they could have a mating market. They could basically desire and be desired. I analyzed it from the point of view of sexual fields, which sexual fields basically emerge when, and this is Green saying it, when a subset of actors with potential romantic or sexual interest orient themselves towards one another according to a logic of desirability imminent to their collective relations, and this logic produces, to greater and lesser degrees, a system of stratification. So basically, women kind of entered this new social environment in which they understood that they can desire and can be desired. In sociological terms, the study of this sexual field basically offered me a framework for analyzing how collective attributions of desire and desirability are shaped by the sexual field itself. So in a way, I tried to perform a study of the erotic backstage. And as I said just a minute ago, the sexual fields theory basically spoke to what I was observing in the field, and that is a creation of categories of males, which subsequently created categories of relationships. So you have to imagine this group of women who come to an environment in which they are post-Soviet at the beginning, and then they become more and more Ukrainian, Moldovan, Georgian, Russian, so on and so forth. In this new social environment, they're not the only immigrants. There are also other immigrants who were there before them, as I said, Albanians, Chinese, Northern Africans, so on and so forth. And by going around this new social environment, so for example, when they went to the Thursday market, they had the possibility to interact with a whole lot of new potential partners in this sense. And from this interaction with these new potential partners, and through evaluating the individual characteristics of these participants in this new ethnosexual contact zones, for example, the Thursday market, they were able to create a system of sexual stratification that basically evaluated so males in terms of strength, which is here, unfortunately, it's in Italian, which is potenza, in terms of reliability, serietà, and in terms of effectiveness, solidità. So in terms of strength, was evaluated in sexual and relational terms as a capacity to give a woman what she needs, that is physical satisfaction, erotic reconnaissance, and appreciation for her being womanly. Reliability needs to be understood as a real desire to take care of your own woman, of the family, and be a person you can rely on. Whereas the effectiveness refers to the effective resources that are needed in order to construct something. Basically, that gave them the possibility to construct 6 ethno-sexual categories. Sovlok means basically ex-Soviet, and it's a derogatory term that was identified with alcohol consumption and aggressivity. But it coincides with sexual strength, but not with reliability and effectiveness. The Albanians were framed as being better than a Sovlok, but not as reliable as, for example, Macedonac, which is a citizen from the former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. But still, it was, let's say, it was understood as in terms of sexual and erotic strength. So it's really a stratification system where at the bottom is a co-ethnic or a former co-ethnic, while at the top it's basically you can find Italians that are divided into 2 categories. So either they are married, which basically means that they have got a whole lot of positive characteristics, but they cannot be as reliable as elderly Italians, because they cannot grant you a legally viable relationship. Whereas elderly, I'm finish up. Whereas elderly Italians can actually make you become a real signora, which is why that's the title of my book. I'll skip very quickly. So in a way, the consequences of this sexual stratification basically are the fact that women feel as women again, but it also entails the ethnicization and the racialization of the lovescapes that then acts as a differentiation of the life trajectory. So if you date a Sovlok, the probability that you will become a signora is way less than if you're dating an Italian elderly or a widowed or a divorced man, because most probably you will have the possibility of marrying that person and basically re-become a signora, re-become a decent person. After 2 decades, clearly things have come. They have become different people. We all have. And one last thing, that from the mechanism that I have described to you, new social types emerge within new generations. This is a story of Kay that basically ends up in a co-ethnic marriage, but still embraces parts of what has been paved by her mother, a former care worker. Thank you very much for the possibility of speaking about my work. If you're interested in hopefully purchasing the book, please do it through the Chicago website by using this promo code. Thank you.